This is a video for someone who may have seen vegan activists around or heard the term vegan and not really known why are vegans acting this crazy or, what are their beliefs. So let me break it down for you. First and foremost is the moral statement that almost everybody agrees with. Whether you're a vegan or a meat eater, almost everybody that I know would agree with the following statement, which is if you can avoid causing violence, you should. That's just this statement, right? And if you can avoid, like, say, and you can extend that and say, like, if you can avoid, stabbing someone in the throat or punching someone or whatever, you should, right? Now, like if you're driving your car and there's a dog in front of you and you have the opportunity to swerve safely or to slow down and stop safely, the question is, should you do that or should you just ram the dog over, right? And I think everybody across the board agrees you should slow down and let the dog, safely pass or whatever, right? Okay. So now the next thing that comes into question is, yeah, well, what about nutrients, right? And I know this because I was a meat eater for most of my life, right? So I know what I was thinking before I went vegan, right? And number one on the list is nutrients. Number one by far is nutrients. So the question is, do we need the nutrients in animals? And I would suspect that you believe, if you're watching this, you're not vegan, that you believe that we require the nutrients from an animal. Now, I would just encourage you to research this. So look at the Lancet. The Lancet's a very popular UK medical journal. They say you can be vegan. You got to balance your diet like anybody does, whether you're a meat eater or not. A well-balanced vegan diet is totally good for all stages of life. The nutrition and dietetics, the Academy of Nutritionists and Dietetics, or whatever that is, that's the largest body of dietitians in the world. They've got over 100,000 members, and they say a well-planned vegan diet is good for all stages of life. So, I mean, you want to be extra sure. If you're eating animals because you think you need the nutrients, you want to be extra sure that you definitely require the nutrients from these animals, because you're causing a lot of pain and suffering to these animals, right? And that might violate our first moral code, which is if we can avoid causing suffering, we should, right? We all agree with that. If we can avoid causing suffering, if we can avoid violence, if we can avoid murdering innocent animals that want to live or innocent people that want to live, we should, right? Only if our hand is absolutely forced, and there are such situations where our hand is absolutely forced, only in those situations should we morally accept a position of inflicting pain or suffering. So that's essentially what I wanted to talk about, kind of talking to myself as when I was a meat eater. Yeah, so that's why I'm vegan now, and that's why now I promote a vegan lifestyle as much as possible, and try and convert as many people to vegans, because there is a lot of suffering and pain that's being done to these animals, right? And I now believe that that's not required at all. So yeah, I want you to consider that and ask yourself, can I avoid? Because every time you eat animal products, whether it's meat or dairy or eggs or whatever, you're causing an immense amount of suffering to these animals. And if you're unsure with like dairy and eggs, there are many resources online. You can ask me in the comments or just do some fishing around. For dairy, just research dairy is scary. For eggs, look up, I don't know, eggs are scary. You'll probably get the same result, but the dairy is scary video is really quite good. So yeah, you're causing a lot of pain and suffering, and the question is, can you avoid doing it? Right? I mean, here's an example. Like, let's say you were used to getting your vitamin C source from like dog meat or something like that, or like cow meat or whatever, and then you were like given an orange, and someone's like, "Oh, this orange actually has all the vitamin C you need. You don't need to kill the animal anymore." Would you say, "Well, I really love killing, and so I'm going to keep killing these animals," or would you say like, "Okay, cool, I can learn how to convert to this orange," right? Or protein, if someone comes at you with protein, which is a much better example, because your protein source right now currently is animals, right? And then you learn through hopefully some research that you can get all your protein very, very easily from beans, other vegetables, lentils. So would you say, are you going to say, I'm going to keep killing It's totally cool. I'm going to keep causing suffering and violence, even though there's these beans and stuff. Or would you just cook the beans and eat the beans, right? If you can avoid causing immense suffering and pain, you should, right? Everyone agrees with this. So the question is, can you get these nutrients from another source, right? So I know you want to put it off. I know you want to put it off and think that these animals on farms are somehow being taken care of, and that, you know, certainly there's not atrocities that are happening on these farms, because, you know, someone would take care of that. No one in the government would allow animals to be, you know, tortured and like murdered senselessly. Like, no, certainly someone else is taking care of that problem, right? And that's why we don't have to worry about that problem. But unfortunately, that's not true. Unfortunately, they are farming. The animal agriculture is a literal hell on earth. If you've seen footage of what happens in there, eventually, think about it, eventually a blade's got to run across the throat if you want to get the meat from the animal, right? And in a dairy farm, it's much worse. It's much, much worse in a dairy farm, because they molest and impregnate and steal the babies of these cows until they stop making milk, and then they run a blade across their throat to eat them for meat at like 4 years old, instead of like dying at like 20 to 25 years old. So there's so much suffering and hellish conditions that are going on. So anyway, I want you to consider, must I continue causing violence and suffering? Or is it possible to get all of the nutrients from oranges in that case, and then beans, you know, or anything else, right? Iron, whatever. Can I get them from a plant source? Because if you can get them from a plant source, and there's grocery stores everywhere, there's probably, you know, within 500 meters of wherever you are, if you're in anywhere close to a city, is almost every imaginable vegetable, right? So the question is, must I, you know, if I'm a meat eater, must I continue paying for someone to kill these animals? Must I? Or is it possible to avoid it? In fact, is it very, very, very easy to avoid causing that? Right? And a follow-up would be, if you can easily avoid causing violence or suffering, you should. And I think everybody agrees with that. Peace!